from United States of America, Krishna Keshava. So now I request Krishna Keshava to speak on the theme Krishna. Now over to Krishna Keshava.
Namaste. Thank you to the organizers and my dandavats to Sripad Shanta Maharaj and Sripad Muni Maharaj. I'm here to talk about some very important topics discussed by our Guru, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, in reference to Turiyatita and Turiyatita. So, I'm sharing my screen now. I hope you can all see okay.
Yes. Okay.
I'm here with from the Bhaktivedanta Institute of Spiritual Culture and Science in Princeton, New Jersey. And I'm going to begin with the 3 planes of consciousness discussed in the Gaudiya Sampradaya: exploitation, renunciation, and dedication. Exploitation is meaning self-interest. We're trying to exploit environment, take from environment for our own self-interest. Renunciation means we recognize the downfall of exploitation, so we try to do nothing. We try to withdraw completely. And finally, dedication is where bhakti comes in. Dedication is where we recognize the downfall of exploitation and renunciation, because they're both based on self-interest instead of the interest of serving, instead of the interest of God, how we can positively engage everything that God has given us to serve. What is that positive action that we can take? So, here we're talking about the 4 states of the soul: waking, sleeping, deep sleep, and pure consciousness, Turiya. And then what is beyond that? Turiyatita. And then we also have the 5 types of knowledge: pratyaksha, direct sense perception; paroksha, knowledge gathered from the experience of others; and aparoksha, some hazy experience. We'll find out that aparoksha is actually related to deep sleep, the 3rd state of the soul. And then adhoksaja, this is where the transcendental experience begins. And then finally apakrita, which means material. This is the highest spiritual conception. So, to get a little more detail about these 5 types of knowledge, both pratyaksha and paroksha are the individual trying to use his own effort, his own will, to go to the absolute, to find out about the nature of reality. And due to our finite nature, these things are finite. We will not be able to comprehend or grasp the absolute, because the finite can never grasp the infinite. However, the infinite can reveal itself to the finite, because the finite is inside the infinite. So, aparoksha, this hazy experience where the subject and material object come together and the material object vanishes in the subject, this is the beginning of the transcendental experience where the infinite is descending. Now, adhoksaja is fully transcendental. This is existing beyond the gross and subtle senses, which are smell, taste, sight, touch, hearing, mind, false ego, and intelligence. This adhoksaja is grand, all-powerful, awe-inspiring. This is spiritual plane of Vaikuntha, where we have Narayan, where it is not similar to this mundane world in any way. We are hearing in the Shastra of the residents of Vaikuntha, Narayan and the other inhabitants, of having 4 arms. This is representative of the fantastic nature of Vaikuntha, of that spiritual plane, of magnificence. But then we have Apakrita, which is the highest spiritual conception. This is Vrindavan, Vrindavan is a simple nature. It actually resembles this mundane world because of Yoga Maya. Yet it is not mundane. It's the highest spiritual position. So these three areas, the three planes of consciousness, 4 states of the soul, and 5 types of knowledge. I've already talked about how deep sleep and Turiya, deep sleep is likened to apokrisha, and then pure consciousness, Turiya, is likened to adhoksaja, that first level of true transcendental spiritual reality, but it's not the highest. Although it is not material in any way, it is fully spiritual. It's not the highest plane. The highest plane is beyond Turiya, called Turiyatita, is Aprakita. This is Vrindavan, where Krishna is having his most simple, sweetest leelas. Now, the practice of bhakti yoga is to serve the servants of Krishna, to serve the servants of the Absolute. How we can harmonize with the Absolute from our finite position can only happen through the mercy, the descending mercy of that Absolute, and it comes in the form of loving devotional service. So, this is explained by Srila Sridhar Maharaj, who has been mentioned by Sripad Shanta Maharaj and Sripad Muni Maharaj already in this section from the Golden Volcano of Divine Love. Okay, Vrindavan, the highest plane of divinity, is a stage of consciousness. Above the plane of awe and reverence found in Vaikuntha is Vrindavan, the land of simplicity and divine love. The peculiarity of the inhabitants of that highest plane of consciousness is that they do not feel they are in Vrindavan. It is aprakrita, supramundane. Knowledge has been classified under 5 headings. The lowest is knowledge acquired through one's own senses, pratyaksha, what we have experienced through our senses. That is the first stage. The next higher stage is knowledge we have not experienced with our own senses, but have gathered from the experience of others, paroksha. Just as the scientists have their experience, and we have gathered some knowledge from their inventions and discoveries. The third stage is above the stage of human experience, aparoksha. It is something like deep sleep. When we awaken, we say, I slept very happily. I slept a very good, sound sleep. But when in deep, dreamless sleep, we have no consciousness of that state. When we return from a deep, dreamless sleep, we express some awareness of that experience, but it is hazy. Aparoksha is a sort of hazy experience which is indistinct, where the subject and material object come together and the material object vanishes in the subject. Shankaracharya, the great proponent of the impersonal, explains the gradation of consciousness up to this point. On the other hand, the great devotee scholar Ramanujacharya, as well as other Vaishnava acharyas, are of the opinion that there is a 4th stage beyond this. That plane is called adhoksaja, transcendental, or that which exists beyond the scope of the senses, whether gross or subtle. It is a plane that we can experience only when, by its sweet will, it comes down to our gross plane of understanding. If it with, we can't find it. We cannot say that the absolute truth is under the control of our knowledge. We can't measure it like that. It is independent. By its sweet will, it may come down, and we may experience that higher realm. But if it withdraws, we are quite helpless. We can do nothing. We may cry, or we may pray, but we can't enter there forcibly by dint of our own power. This is the 4th plane of consciousness, and it is grand, all-powerful, and awe-inspiring. Only if it reveals itself to us can we have some experience of that plane known as Vaikuntha, the unlimited spiritual region of awe and power. That is the adhoksaja plane. So there is pratyaksha, direct experience through sense perception, then paroksha, learning through the experience of others, then aparoksha, the negative plane of indistinct consciousness, and then the 4th dimension, adhoksaja. We are underground, Real knowledge is above, on the surface, beyond our experience. If we can pierce through the thick coverings walling up our experience, we can come in connection with another plane of consciousness. That is adhoksaja. Adhokritam indrijanam janam. Adhoksaja means the superior knowledge which can force down our knowledge of the experience of this world. That transcendental, supramental knowledge is the fourth stage of knowledge. That plane is different in every way. It is not similar to this world. But through Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we come to know that there is a fifth stage of knowledge, which is very similar to this mundane world, yet is not mundane. It is called aprakrita. That is Goloka, the full-fledged theistic conception, which is only found in Krishna's domain. Central knowledge of the Absolute must have a connection with even the lowest level of mundane creation. It must be able to harmonize the worst portion of the illusory world. This is known as aprakrita, supramundane. To enter that highest realm is possible only through divine love. Everything can be compensated only through love. There is a saying that a loving mother thinks that her blind child has a beautiful lotus eyes. She is blinded by affection. So what is mean and low can only be compensated by love. That shines very beautifully. That is prem, or divine love. Through mercy, through pity, through grace, a king can come to play with a boy on the street. Affection can make it possible. The difference between high and low disappears at such a stage. Now, we must keep in mind that it is only through the mercy of these highest Paramahamsa devotees that we can hear such nectar about the highest planes of reality, Goloka. It is not something to take cheaply in any way. And this next shloka from Srimad Bhagavatam references the proper way to receive hearing about those highest things. This is from the 10th canto of Bhagavatam, chapter 33, text 39. Vikrididham vraja vadhubir idam chavishno shradhan vito nuryad ata varnayed yaha bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhya kamam hridrogam asvapi hinotya chirena diraha. If a self-controlled person listens with faith to the confidential pastimes of Sri Krishna with the damsels of Raja from the mouth of Sri Guru and glorifies it at every second, then he immediately obtains transcendental devotion towards the Supreme Lord and becomes capable of distancing himself from the heart disease of lust without any delay. This translation was given by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada, in the 8th volume of Dainik Nadia Prakash on the 29th of October in 1933, under the title of Rasa Yatra. So, when we are engaging in hearing about these highest things, we can never take it cheaply. And if we're engaging in talking about it in any way, it can only be under the guidance of the proper authority. Who is that sadhu who has heard from another proper authority of the proper method of glorifying that plane of reality? Never thinking that we, through however much effort we've put in, or perhaps seva that we've done even, we can never think that we are on that platform and we are talking about that to enjoy it for ourselves. That will make us suffer the worst kind of illusion. And it is a fact that it will happen unless we are taking unless we are taking the protection of a proper sadhu who has heard properly also. Then we may talk about these things only to glorify them, never to describe them. We have no power to describe them, only to glorify them. And this is something that is talked about by Srila Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami is called the Abhideya Acharya. He gives us the instructions on how we may practice to achieve our goal of Krishna Prem, of love for God, through service. So throughout the writings of Rupa Goswami, we will find these highest glorifications, these highest even descriptions. He has the power to describe them because he has heard about them from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. But we are not in that position. We may follow the practice given to us by acharyas to reach the goal, which is called prayojan, the goal which is given by Raghunath Das Goswami Pandit. The goal is called Radhadasyam. Radhadasyam means become a servant of the Supreme. That is our position, that is our goal, and that is the practice of bhakti. And it's very nice. It's very nice. And the whole Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta, the conception, is something that is found in the Western world also. Shripad Muni Maharaj had also discussed this. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, who is a Vaishnava Acharya, had given a discussion, a very profound and important discussion called the Bhagavat speech. And in that Bhagavat speech, he mentioned that the highest truth was seen in the East by Veda Vyas, and that same thing was seen on the West by Plato. And a student of Plato was Aristotle, and a student of Aristotle was Hegel. And our institute, the Bhaktivedanta Institute in Princeton, New Jersey, is working to talk about consciousness, talk about the truths we find in Bhagavad Vedanta philosophy to the Western scholars through the examples given by Aristotle and Hegel, who are representing that same Vaishnava Siddhanta of the Absolute. So we're running out of time here today, but I will put a link to the rest of this presentation in the chat, and we have a bunch of slides about Western philosophy and how it relates to the Eastern philosophy. But I'd like to end with one quote from a book by our serving director, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj. Descartes' cognito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, has come to signify the slogan for modernity. I think puts all important power of thinking in the I. Not only that, it also establishes the absolute being of the I. However, if we try to determine how it is that we perform this amazing activity of thinking, we draw a blank. If I don't know how to do it, then the certainty that I do it should at least seem dubitable. Hegel looks at the problem more realistically. Withdrawing from reality to be with one's subjective thought alone is a detachment from the substantial content of true reality and becomes a conceit or superiority to it. This type of freedom from the content must be given up, and instead of arbitrarily directing the content of one's thought, one's freedom should be sunk into and pervade the content of reality, letting thought be directed and controlled by reality's own proper nature, of which our essential selves are but a part and manifestation. We do not lose anything thereby except our false sense of self, false ego, ahankar, and rather gain our true identity and real concrete freedom. This is from the book Idols of the Mind versus True Reality. It can be found internationally on Amazon, amazon.in, amazon.com, amazon.co.uk, and we invite you to visit our website and reach out about the content of that book, of the content of this talk, and engage with us more. Finally, we just have some pictures here of the devotees. The goal of life is to serve the servants of Bhagavan. and it is the highest fulfillment of our freedom and the highest expression of our freedom. And we were here talking about Satchidananda. This nice program was held by the Bliss Society, Satchidananda. The highest bliss is experienced when we're in service to the devotees, and we can see a fraction of that in some of these very nice pictures here. So I'm very grateful to everyone involved in this today, and I pay my obeisance. Thank you.
Pranam, Krishna Keshava Das ji. You have very beautifully narrated your experience